Hey everyone, this is Derek Bros of the Conscious Resistance Network, and today we're going to talk about the vaccine information war. Before we do that, I'd like to remind you guys to bookmark theconsciousresistance.com, which is where you can find all of my books, which you can download for free. You can watch all of our documentaries for free. You can read years worth of essays and articles about all kinds of topics. And of course, you can check out our various podcasts. And if you want to sign up for our email newsletter to stay in touch, do so right there. Finally, follow us on all of our alternative social media channels, Minds, Hive, join our Discord channel, sign up for our text list, follow us on Float and BitChute, and if you want to support, do so at Patreon, and yeah, if you want to, go ahead and follow us at YouTube. Alright, so today's topic, as I said, is the information war, but the vaccine information war. Now, an information war is, I think, just another way to say propaganda. Propaganda is, of course, a piece of information that is meant to influence a person, not always necessarily for a negative thing, like to enslave them or to, get them to do something against their own interest, but just to influence somebody in the purest sense of propaganda. And I create propaganda for influencing people for liberty and truth and freedom and questioning and self-empowerment. So a propaganda war is what has been going on since time immemorial between states, churches, kingdoms. They've always tried to use their own propaganda. There's always been an information war going on. Of course, for most of history, it's been a one-sided war, which I guess technically isn't a war. It's a genocide or a disaster. But it's been propaganda on one side for years, for most of our lifetimes, for most of our history. That is the propaganda on the side of the state, whether that state is the church or the kingdom or the literal government, but propaganda coming out from them. And that could just be proclamations from the church or from the kingdom saying this is what you're allowed to believe, this is what you're allowed to talk about. And then, of course, with the arrival of the printing press, then putting out official statements from the church and official statements from the government and from the ruling bodies of what is acceptable, of which God we follow, which laws are just, what is illegal, etc., all decided by the crown, as it were. And that is how history has been. Then with the printing press, once it started to get trickled down to the average person and more people with, starting to learn how to read and write and communicate ideas, and obviously people were communicating ideas prior to the existence of the printing press and reading and writing. But my point is, for most people, they didn't start to understand the concept of liberty or freedom beyond the inherent intuitive feeling that I think human beings get from being free and from trying to strive to be free of, living a life free of interference and free of control and coercion. Beyond that, though, most people didn't understand the concept of liberty and couldn't propagate a message to say, hey, maybe the state is wrong, maybe the king is wrong, maybe the president is wrong. And that led to anarchism and a lot of radical political movements. My point is, though, for most history, it's been a one-sided battle. For the last couple hundred years, it has been more and more a two-way information war between the people who are trying to spread alternative visions to what the state offers and to the people who are within the state and trying to maintain power. Now, of course, even the people who are outside of the state who offer their visions, like, say, various political movements, they don't all agree on everything, but they're offering a different narrative than the state often. So, I said all that to say this. We are at a point now where the part of the information war that is becoming more and more important has to do with vaccines. And I think one of the first shots, pun intended, in this vaccine information war was just launched within a week ago by the New York Times. This is coming from a new article that I just put out today on The Last American Vagabond. Which side of the vaccine information war are you on? And as I said, the New York Times launches the first shot in the vaccine information war. And I asked, do you support individual liberty or collective force? And I'd like for your answer in the comments. In a recently published opinion piece, the New York Times all but declared war against Americans who question the safety of vaccines. Of course, the war being waged is, for the moment, a war of the words, an information war. This skeptical and vocal group, which is attacked as anti-vaxxers, have built a movement of doctors, journalists, parents, and activists who question the safety of vaccines, question the schedule and frequency of immunizations, the legality and morality of forced vaccinations, and the influence of Big Pharma. But according to the New York Times, it is this group, the people who are skeptical of vaccines, who pose the most threat in the recovery from COVID-19 because potentially they might reject the COVID-19 vaccine. In the Times' recently published piece titled, "Get Ready for a Vaccine Information War," the writer says, what if we get a COVID-19 vaccine and half the country refuses to take it? So from there, he says some other things. What I really want to focus on is he completely is dismissive of the concerns of every single one of you out there, whether you are, you wear the label anti-vaxxer proudly, or you just consider yourself a concerned parent or a concerned health worker, or just somebody who believes in vaccines but also believes in freedom of choice and bodily autonomy. The New York Times and other people like them want to dismiss your concerns. They want to make them seem unimportant and simple and just, not worthy of consideration to the masses, okay? So I'm going to give you a couple of examples here, and the reason that I wrote this article is because, for one, New York Times, despite losing listeners and readers over the years, they're still one of the biggest mainstream publications. Of course, they've partnered with the telecom industry on 5G. They used to work with, I say that, right, with the CIA to help disseminate false information. They've propagated lies like the weapons of mass destruction, as have other major papers. And so they're influential, is my point. They're influential. What they say, people listen to. And lots of our friends and family will have read this piece perhaps in the newspaper or on the website and think about the other places that reblog it and share it. My point is the message is getting out there that the vaxxers, the anti-vaxxers, and their concerns are not important and they shouldn't even be considered. So let's look at this. He concedes that the pandemic's urgency increases the likelihood of a COVID-19 vaccine being fast-tracked through testing and approval. Quote, "It may not go through years of clinical trials and careful studies of possible long-term side effects the way other drugs do. However, rather than exploring the potential pitfalls of an untested vaccine and attempting to inoculate the entire world, the writer focused his efforts on making sure the reader is aware that the lack of testing, quote, could create an opening for anti-vaccine activists to claim that it is untested and dangerous, and to spin reasonable concerns about the vaccine into widespread, unfounded fears about its safeties." So the writer and apparently his editor seem more concerned with scoring points against vaccine skeptics rather than investigating whether fast-tracking vaccines is actually the best and safest path forward. The second reason he says that the skeptics could succeed in creating doubt about COVID-19 vaccine is because of the involvement of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the World Health Organization, and saying that these groups have been successful in crusading against these individuals for years and have plenty of material stockpiled to try to discredit them. So again, rather than exploring the concerns about why people talk about conflicts of interest between Bill and Melinda Gates and his many funding projects and how he's benefiting off this, rather than looking at any of that, they basically just call it baseless conspiracy theories, which is what we should expect. And of course, The Last American Vagabond here on this website, my articles, Whitney Webb's, and Ryan's videos, have repeatedly exposed how the Gates Foundation and the Gates Funded Who are funding a nexus of various nonprofits, NGOs, government bodies, and pharmaceutical companies. And finally, the Times writer acknowledges that one of the biggest fears of the skeptics, the idea that travel, work, and normal life might not resume without proof of vaccination, is likely true, but then dismisses any attempt at dialogue on the topic. So check this out. This is coming from the New York Times. Third, if and when a COVID-19 vaccine is approved for widespread use, people may be required to take it before being allowed to fly on certain airlines, attend certain schools, or enter certain businesses. Of course, to this writer in the New York Times, quote, "That's a good idea public health-wise, but it would play into some of the worst fears of the anti-vaccine movement." The writer does acknowledge that many activists are concerned about mandatory vaccinations. However, beyond that one-sentence acknowledgement, he does not dare dive deep into the constitutional questions surrounding forced vaccinations. While he notes that people may be required to receive a vaccine to fly, work, attend school, or enter certain businesses, he does not bother answering the question of why Americans are concerned about such policies. And instead, he talks about the need to build a strong pro-vaccine movement that can challenge the anti-vaccine movement. Otherwise, and to do everything, so he says, quote, "to do everything we can to reach the people in our lives who might be susceptible to anti-vaccine propaganda." And, he also says the New York Times and some of the health officials they interviewed believe that the public's desire to, quote, "return to normal life" might overpower anti-vaccine activism. However, from what I've seen, the Times is correct that there is an information war taking place at this very moment. The information war has been waged throughout the history of kingdoms, churches, and states, as I said. And at this point in history, one of the most crucial aspects of this information war is the vaccine information war. We are in the final stages of the battle for hearts and minds, the struggle between those who believe in freedom and those who believe in control. More specifically, the fight between the principles of self-ownership, freedom of choice, freedom of association, and basic human dignity, and those who believe in collectivism, force, and slavery. That's what the battle is between. That's what it comes down to, guys. I think I've talked about this during my campaign for mayor because I made calling for saying that I would never stand for mandatory vaccinations. I wish some people wish I was in that position now. I mean, I bet some people wish that now. But I was saying at the time that the whole argument here is that whether or not you support vaccinations, that it's immoral, wrong, unethical for people to be forced to be medicated, whether that's vaccines or pills, with cannabis, with whatever. People should have the freedom to do so. Of course, what it comes down to is the argument of individualism versus collectivism. The collectivist worldview, whatever your politics are, if you're a collectivist, you tend to believe that the collective good outweighs the individual good. Whereas from an individualist perspective, the individual is the smallest minority and needs to be protected because the individual is always at risk of being trampled on because people say, oh, well, screw that one person as long as the rest of us are good. So that collectivism is a very dangerous idea. It's something that I stand against, and I think that's the crux of our argument, is those who believe that your individual liberties should not impede the collective health of the rest of us. So if I have to force vaccinate you against your will and your, quote unquote freedoms or whatever you want to call them, well, that's just too bad because the rest of us need to stay safe. And well, if some people's kids get harmed or some people get sick from using an untested, rushed vaccine, well, that's just too bad because the majority of us did okay. That's collectivism. That's, really the worst parts of the tyranny of the majority or democracy. And it is truly tyranny. And that's what I believe we're working against, that collectivist mindset, which rears itself in so many ways. And in this instance, the manipulators are using COVID-19 as a way to divide the people by trying to scare people into accepting almost anything, including an untested vaccine, and then those who question it are deemed the crazy ones and are pushed out of society. And probably, as I covered in my recent article about Florida, and the Florida already having an emergency order and executive order to where it says the state surgeon general can order you to be vaccinated, that's where we're at now. The vaccination information war is on. And the New York Times basically is calling out to their people and saying that it's time to battle against the anti-vaxxers. This is where we're at. We're splitting off into two different societies. The world is fracturing further and further between those who swallow the state propaganda and those who question it. And not to say that those two groups, I'm not trying to judge them as a collective. They're all individuals with different views, and some they agree and disagree. But generally, there are people who trust and follow the systems and do so unquestionably and willingly and blindly, and there are those who are skeptical and question and are thinking long term and not just letting their fear guide them for the moment so that they can be duped into accepting something less than what they deserve and accepting a reality that is truly slavery. That's what we're fighting against. Thank you guys for listening. This is Derek Bros of the Conscious Resistance Network. Until next time, remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free, my friends. Peace.